Last week, we talked about laying the weight down, the expectations that were never yours to carry, the responsibility you've been holding for everyone else's outcomes for way longer than you might be willing to admit, the belief that everything depends on you, because that is the story you have told yourself for far too long. Maybe while you were listening, something shifted. Maybe you finally recognized a weight that didn't belong to you anymore. Or maybe you even decided, I'm done carrying all of this. But then Monday came, or Tuesday came, or whatever day of the week it might have been. The point is, someone appeared in your doorway asking for something. A problem landed A problem landed on your desk, a relationship got hard when it hadn't felt that way before, or something didn't go according to plan. Because as we know, life is always lifing all the time. But before you even realized what had happened, there you were. You picked it up. You were carrying it again. And it's not because you wanted to or because you failed or even thought that you failed, but it was more about there was something inside of you that reached for what had always felt familiar. It was likely so unconsciously that you may not have even recognized it until we're having this conversation right now. And that's the part I want to talk about today because I don't think Pete I don't think we keep picking the weight back up because we're weak. And I don't think that we do it because we haven't learned the lesson. But I do think that we do it because there is a part of us that still believes somehow, somewhere, that weight is actually protecting us. So today I want to ask you a question. If you've already laid the dang weight down, if you've already laid it down, why the heck do you keep picking it back up? Now, I don't want you to have a knee jerk reaction, but I do want you to sit with that for a moment. Let it settle in your system and think about it. If you've already laid the weight down, why do you keep reaching to pick it back up? You see, I think one of the greatest lies we've ever believed is that every time we return to an old version of ourselves, that it somehow means we failed, or that we didn't learn the lesson, or that we aren't disciplined enough, or maybe even that we haven't healed as much as we thought we had. And so then we start shaming ourselves. We start criticizing ourselves. Maybe even wondering, and I'm sure you've had this thought, I know that I have, but maybe you even wonder, why the hell do I keep ending up in the same place over and over and over and over again? But what if none of that is actually true? What if the simple story we've developed over time is just that? It's a story. And what if the reason you keep reaching for the weight has absolutely nothing to do with a lack of discipline and everything to do with something so much deeper? Think about it. Because when life gets hard, you don't usually stop and create an entirely new response. I mean, that would be silly, right? But you do instinctively reach for the one that's always been there, your familiar go to, because it's the one that helped you survive the last hard season. It's the one that got you through the disappointment, the betrayal, the uncertainty, maybe even the chaos, but especially the pressure. Now, I know, and you know, that you likely don't consciously choose it. Because if you did, you probably wouldn't choose it over and over and over again. But while you may not consciously choose it, you do execute it. And I don't think we do that because it's the best response. I mean, we're actually learning that that's really not true. But I do think that you execute it because it's the most familiar response your system knows. It feels like it simply retreats back into its shell, right? And somewhere along the way, what started out as protection slowly drifted into becoming your identity. You stopped seeing it as something you learned to do because it became so familiar to your body. The response became so instinctive that you stopped questioning it. Instead, you started believing it was simply who you were. And you probably tell yourself things, I know I have, but you probably say things to yourself like, well, this is just how I lead. Or, you know what? It's the way I have always been. Or maybe you think, well, this is just the way I was taught. Or here's the famous one, right? This is just how I do it. And you really, really dig your heels in on that one. I mean, for some of you, it might sound like this is just how I handle pressure because the story is still really alive in there. Now, this is my personal favorite. And I guess many of you might have also said this before. I used to say this all the time, and it is this is just who I am. Take it or leave it with an attitude, right? And all of that, that's simply the armor showing back up. But what if it isn't who you are? What if it isn't just how you handle pressure? What if you've been calling it your personality? Well, that's just who I am. When it's really just been a strategy, something so familiar that it's been operating unconsciously all along. Now, it's a strategy that once served you. Yes. It's a strategy that may have even saved you. Yes. We all have those stories. That's not anything new. But it's also a strategy that no longer belongs in the life you're trying to build or the leader you're becoming. Listen, you don't need it anymore. So I want to give that strategy a name because I want to help you understand what's been actually happening all along. I call it an invisible survival strategy. And not because it's wrong or because it's weak. Listen, there's nothing weak about surviving. But because it quietly begins organizing the way we lead, the way we love, the way we communicate, the way we make decisions, and also really the way we move through the world long after that original threat has passed. I know you can recognize that. I know you're already beginning to remember moments where that's happened for you. So maybe, just maybe, the reason that you keep picking up the weight isn't because you lack discipline. Maybe it's because an old survival strategy still believes that weight is the safest place for you to be. But here's what I've come to realize. Safety and peace are not the same thing. In fact, for most of my life, I think I believed that they were. And maybe you can relate to that. You see, I thought if I could just create enough certainty, or if I could prepare enough, or maybe if I could control enough or carry enough. I've often thought, what if I could perform well enough? I'm sure you have your own, all of those enoughs that we put on ourselves. I thought by all of those enoughs that I would eventually arrive at peace. But my friend, that is not peace. That is a recipe for disaster. Ask me how I know. It's a different conversation. It is the pursuit of safety, though. And they're not the same thing. What I've learned, what I want to share, safety is always looking around the corner asking, what do I need to do so nothing falls apart? Peace asks a completely different question. It sounds like, who do I trust even if things do fall apart? Where safety will tell you, protect yourself, protect yourself. You've got to protect yourself, do these things. Peace will say, I want you to remember that you are not alone. You see, safety keeps us looking for that armor. And we've talked about that before, but safety keeps us looking for that armor. But peace reminds us that we no longer actually need it. That's why the old version of us keeps reaching for the weight, that familiarity. It's not because it enjoys carrying it, we absolutely don't, but because somewhere along the way, the weight became proof that we were still protected. And I think it usually sounds something like this. If I can carry it, I can control it. If I control it, maybe I can keep everyone safe. Maybe I can keep myself safe. Maybe I can keep life from hurting again. That one still stings for me. That maybe I can keep life from hurting again. But then I realize it's actually just an illusion, because carrying more has never produced peace. At least not for me. It hasn't for me. Maybe it has for you, but it has not for me. Because carrying more has never actually produced peace for me. In fact, it's only produced the feeling that I was doing something. And doing something can often feel safer than surrendering, especially when surrender has been mistaken for giving up. But surrender isn't quitting. Surrender is trusting. It's remembering that you were never meant to be the source. You were never meant to hold everything together. In fact, you were never meant to carry what only God was designed to carry. And maybe that's why peace has felt so unfamiliar. I know it has for me a time or two, because we've spent so many years practicing safety that peace starts to feel pretty risky. When the truth is, peace has been waiting for us the entire time. Peace has been waiting for us the entire time. Here's where I think we've gotten it backwards. We've spent so much time trying to get rid of the old version of ourselves that we've forgotten to ask why it even showed up in the first dang place. Maybe that version of you wasn't trying to sabotage you. Maybe it was actually trying to save you. Think about that for a moment. What if every time you reach for that armor, every time you put that mask back on, every time you picked up the weight again, there was a part of you that was quietly saying, last time this kept us alive, let's do that again. And it's not because it wants to keep you small or it wants to keep you stuck, but because it didn't know there was any other way. It only knew what had worked before. And honestly, how many of us have spent years angry at the very part of ourselves that was simply trying to protect us? I know I have. And all it did was push me into a cycle of shame and blame. It didn't serve me. But yet I know that I didn't know how to break the chain. But what if instead of fighting that part, we thanked it? Stay with me here. What if we thanked it? Not because it still belongs in this season, but because it carried us through the last one. It's what got us here. It did its job. It helped us. It helped us survive. My friend, surviving and living are not the same thing. That can be a hard lesson to learn, but they are not the same thing. And surviving is also not the same thing as leading. There comes a moment in every season of growth where we have to lovingly look at the armor and say, thank you. I know you protected me when I needed protection. I know you carried me when I didn't know how to carry myself. But I don't need you to lead my life anymore. Because what protected you then might actually be preventing you right now. You see, the armor isn't the enemy. It has simply outlived its assignment. What I do know is that armor and peace cannot be worn at the same time. Eventually, one of them has to come off. Now, you may be wondering what all of this has to do with leadership. It has everything to do with it, because here's what I've come to believe. We don't just lead from our knowledge. We don't just lead from our experience. We actually lead from the invisible survival strategies that we've never questioned. Think about the leader who believes they have to carry everything themselves. Newsflash, you either know one or you are one. And I know on the surface, it looks like commitment, dedication, responsibility, but underneath it all, it might simply be an old survival strategy that's whispering. And it sounds like it's whispering things like, if I don't carry it, everything will fall apart. How many times have you ever said that? If I don't carry it, everything will fall apart. Now think about the leader who struggles to delegate, the leader who needs every decision to come back through them, or the leader who feels responsible for everyone else's success, everyone else's emotions, or everyone else's outcomes. We often call that leadership. Sometimes it's survival wearing a leadership badge. And the hardest part? I think the hardest part is that most leaders don't even realize that's what's happening. And here's the part that fascinates me. On top of all of that, organizations don't simply organize themselves around a vision or a strategy or even a process, even though they may think they do. what's actually happening is they begin organizing themselves around the invisible survival strategies of the leader. I want you to think about that for a moment. Think about your own leadership experience. Or maybe think about a leader that you've worked for. And I want you to think about how the entire organization slowly organized itself around the invisible survivable strategies of that leader. You see, a leader who learned to survive by controlling everything often creates a culture where every decision flows back to them. The same is true for a leader who survived by overperforming. They often create a culture where exhaustion becomes the norm. A leader who survived by pleasing everyone often creates a culture where boundaries become blurry and accountability becomes optional. And it's not because they're trying to build those cultures. It's more likely because they're building from what feels familiar. I mean, we've all done that. That's why changing a strategy isn't always enough. Because if the survival strategy underneath it never changes, well, eventually the organization reorganizes itself right back to where it was before. How many times have you seen that happen? It's why I spend so much time talking about our internal operating system. Because leadership doesn't begin with what we do. Leadership begins with what is quietly organizing us. And if we never stop long enough to see that, we'll spend our lives trying to fix the organization, all while the invisible strategy organizing it remains untouched. So if you're sitting here wondering if the armor isn't what carries us forward, what the heck does? Well, let me tell you. Because I don't think it's more confidence. I don't think it's more discipline. And honestly, I don't think it's finally having all of the answers, because who has that? I surely don't. While I don't think it is those things, I do think that it's trust. And I mean real trust, that deep soul level trust. The kind that doesn't depend on circumstances going your way. Because they don't always. Here's what my lived experience has taught me. Peace isn't the absence of chaos, but it is the presence of trust. The world around you can still be uncertain, and it can still feel chaotic. Lord knows it does, so much of the time. The diagnosis can still be scary, and the business can still be stretching you. I mean, relationships can still really be hard. And the future can still feel completely unclear. All of that can be existing simultaneously, even. And somehow, peace can exist there too. It's not because you've figured everything out, because Lord knows I have not. And it's not because nothing hurts anymore. I mean, we're still living life. We're still feeling every moment of it. But because you've stopped believing it's all yours to carry, whew, what a relief it is to finally put that down. I think that's what faith has been inviting us into all along. It's not certainty, it's trust. It's not control. We're all really good at that. It's surrender. Now, I know that word surrender can feel pretty uncomfortable. There was a time in my own life when if someone had told me to surrender instead of control, or to trust instead of strive, or to stop trying to have every answer, honestly, I probably would have looked at them like they had two heads because those ideas felt completely opposite to leadership. I mean, how do you surrender and still lead? For that matter, how do you trust and still lead? How do you let go without feeling like you're giving up? I don't know that I have the answers, but maybe that's exactly what trusting God has always meant. It's not pretending the weight doesn't exist. And it's definitely not pretending that life isn't hard, but it is trusting Him enough to leave the weight where you finally laid it down. Now, I'm not saying that you'll never be tempted to pick it back up, because you probably will. Lord knows I have more times than I'd like to admit. And I've had to walk back through that very conversation where I've had to choose trust again. I've had to lean into my faith again. I've had to remind myself that doing it my way isn't always the same as allowing His way to lead. Fear still comes knocking. Life still happens. None of that suddenly disappears. But something does begin to change. When your old survival strategy reaches for that armor, your faith quietly reaches for your hand. And I want you to picture that, because you're not alone and you never have been. And little by little, you begin trusting your faith more than your fear. Now, I want you to stop just for a moment and really hear me say that, because I think this is so important. You can learn to trust your faith more than your fear. You can begin trusting peace more than protection. You can begin trusting God's presence more than your own performance. And maybe, just maybe, the greatest thing standing between you and the life you're praying for isn't the world around you. It's the armor you've never stopped wearing. Because one day, without even realizing when it happened, freedom starts feeling more familiar than survival ever did. As I've been sitting here having this conversation with you, I keep coming back to one simple realization. Freedom was never supposed to feel familiar in the beginning. And maybe that's why we keep reaching for the armor. Maybe it's why we keep picking the weight back up. Because we have spent so many years practicing survival and almost zero time practicing freedom. You see, we've rehearsed carrying because we've gotten really good at that. We've rehearsed controlling because it's become our safety point. We've rehearsed performing because putting on that mask can feel as second nature as putting on our clothes. And we've rehearsed protecting because for so many times along our journey, we didn't feel protected. So maybe freedom doesn't become familiar because we decided to be free. Maybe it becomes familiar because one choice at a time, we stop rehearsing survival. Instead, we begin practicing presence. We begin practicing peace, not perfectly, but intentionally. Because every single time you choose trust over control, or every single time you choose presence over performance, or every single time you choose peace over protection, you're choosing you. And you're teaching your soul something new. You're reminding yourself that you don't have to become someone else. You simply have to stop returning to someone that you have already outgrown. It's okay to surrender that version of you as you step into the becoming of who you've always been and who you are today. Maybe that's what remembrance has been about all along. It's not remembering who you used to be. It's remembering who you were before fear convinced you that survival was your identity. So I don't want to leave you with advice this week, but I do want to leave you with a question. And I want you to sit with this one. I really, really want you to feel this question, not just hear it. I also don't want you to answer it from your head. I want you to dig deep. I want you to dig deep into your soul, because the next time life gets hard, or the next time pressure rises, the next time your hand instinctively reaches for that armor, I want you to pause and take a breath. And I want you to ask yourself, is this who I truly am? Or is this simply the survival strategy that once kept me alive? Ask that question, and then I want you to listen. I want you to listen with your heart, not with your head. I want you to listen to your body, to your soul, because the answer may not come from your fear. In fact, I believe it may come from the quiet place where your faith has been waiting for you all along.
Leadership isn't what you perform, it's what you embody. If this conversation resonated, share it with someone ready to lead differently. And remember, when your faith ignites your fire amplifies your frequency. Until next time.